Good evening. I've been reading again. We're on the cusp of Christmas, and in amongst all that excitement, myself and Elizabeth have carved out a bit of time to get some reading done. She's reading an Agatha Christie book, and more power to her. And I've just finished this fabulous book, which I picked up from a local library, which was highly embarrassing because I didn't have any cash on me. So they told me that I owed some money to the library, but I'm convinced I brought those books back, but I don't want to talk about it. It's far too traumatic. So this is Doctor Who Wonderland by Doctor Who luminary Paul Magrs. Magrs? I don't know, but I think Paul Magrs would appear to be a very lovely man, as far as I can see. And this is the first of this particular series of books that I've read. Now, my understanding is that they're not doing any more of these, but there are a number of them. I've got another one on the shelf, which, according to the rules of the Whoathon, I can't read yet, which is a bit frustrating, but I'm very much looking forward to reading that when I get around to it. But this book, of course, toys with the idea of mashing Doctor Who with the mighty book Alice in Wonderland, a book which, of course, I've read. You would expect me to have read that, given my position. I'm not as mad keen on Alice in Wonderland as other people, but I value it, and I'm pleased it is around. I think it provides a cornerstone for an awful lot of British culture, peculiar take on things, and I think that a lot of the stuff about Alice in Wonderland has fed into stuff that I care passionately about, such as Doctor Who, and things like Monty Python, a lot of the music of the Beatles. You know, there's a long line that stems from Alice in Wonderland. So I started reading this, and it's got the team of the Fifth Doctor and Tegan and Nyssa and Turlough. And I was unsure as to why, in particular, Paul Magrs had chosen that team to be the focus of the book. I suppose there's the pure aesthetics of it, as in you've got Davison with the way that he's dressed, that sort of Edwardian charm. That chimes pretty well. He's a little bit after the events, but there we go. And then there are some other reasons as well, because you've got Nyssa there. And Nyssa kind of plugs the gap in this book for Alice, who is certainly not a presence within the book to a certain extent. Picking my words carefully here because I don't want to spoil the book for you, because I want you to go and read it. But Nyssa provides the sort of Alice role. You've also got Tegan, who has read Alice in Wonderland, so that's great as well. And it then throws the character of Tegan into a new light, because she is able to touch base with her childhood a little bit. And I made reference in the last video I did about the sort of joy and wonder of being the Doctor's companion, about how in Robots of Sherwood you saw that with Clara. And I made reference to a companion that could have done with a bit more of that. Well, that was Tegan. But I do think this story really offsets that nicely, because she's in Wonderland, and although it's scary and whatever else like that at points, as I say, she touches base with being a child again. And then you have Turlough. Now, this is interesting because this story obviously falls within the sort of trilogy of stories we get where Turlough is under the influence of the Black Guardian. And the Black Guardian is a presence in this book, although, of course, you and I know, if you have seen those stories, of course you may not have done, you should go and see them. But we know that there's no way the Doctor can find out about the Black Guardian being involved. It will spoil Enlightenment if he does. So as a result, the Black Guardian has an influence, and it's logical within the context of this highly illogical story. And we'll come on to that in just a second. And it's trying to say that this is just an excuse, that all that's an excuse to set it in Wonderland. I don't think that's the case, but I think Paul Magrs has just chosen this team, an orchid team. Well, no, not an orchid team. I think Adric. But no, there was legs with this team that we didn't get to see very much, did we? But it's chosen this team to throw into the midst of Wonderland. Now, this is a great book, and I have had a lovely time reading it, and it's been a pleasure and a joy and easy to read. But Whereas at the start, I thought this was just going to be a book where, and I would have been cool with this, don't get me wrong, especially at the moment, where we were just taking on Alice in Wonderland and Doctor Who and ramming them together and having our companions and the Doctor meandering around, meeting caterpillars and rabbits and stuff. And I would have been okay with that. But it's not. There's something a little bit more subtle going on. Now, I think that Paul Magrs has afforded the license for this book because he's doing Wonderland to be able to play fast and loose with logic. And look, you're on brief here, aren't you? But there is something beautiful happening within this. And listen, I'm not messing about. I just read the last bit of this book, and Paul Magrs has got an MA in creative writing. He's got was it a PhD or is it a PhD in Angela Carter? So Dr. Paul Magrs. This is a guy who knows literature. And about page 120, maybe later, something happens within this book where, now, again, spoilers, a presence that you know has been missing enters the story in a way that is completely unexpected within the context of what we've had so far. And as a result, it sort of goes to the next level. It manages to really beautifully balance Doctor Who and Alice in Wonderland. So this is not the Doctor just dropping in on Wonderland. This really is a communication between those two sets of stories. And that is a glorious thing because all of a sudden they are put on an even playing field. Now, I'm not going to mess. I think Doctor Who and Alice in Wonderland play in the same, league. Many people would go, well, it's Alice in Wonderland. You can't possibly say the Doctor Who. No. I'm sorry. I think you're wrong. I think Doctor Who exists in the same way, in the same sort of conversation as Robin Hood and the same sort of conversation as Sherlock Holmes. I think Doctor Who exists in the conversation with Alice in Wonderland. So if you're going to do a thing that balances the two, I think that's a completely reasonable thing to have as much Doctor Who within that structure, context, tone, as you have Alice in Wonderland. So when this presence does enter the story, it makes for a really thrilling moment and a really thrilling ending to the book, which again is to a certain extent somewhat illogical, but is entirely in keeping with Alice in Wonderland and indeed Doctor Who, and it's absolutely fantastic. The other thing I noticed through reading this book is that it's quite metatextual, as you would expect. And therefore, you end up looking at the Doctor and his companions in a slightly different light. And that was really interesting because for all four of them. So with the Doctor, there was a moment where he did a very Fifth Doctor thing where he laughs at the delight at working something out, I think. And honestly, for a split second, I have talked about this before in this series of 1 million billion videos that 2.5 people watch. There is every so often with Doctor Who, that moment where you just touch base with the 12-year-old that you were. And you get that same feeling as when you put, to cite an example, Death to the Daleks on, and the title started, and you were genuinely excited because you'd never seen this John Pertwee story. And it was like, oh my God, here we go. And I got that. I genuinely did. It was like a Five Doctors moment. You're like, oh, and it was like so lovely to think, oh yeah, that's the Fifth Doctor just there on the page. So that was fantastic. And then you got Tegan, who, because again, it's metatextual and she knows what's going on, it provided us with an opportunity to get a bit of interiority of Tegan, really weirdly sort of in this mishmash of stories. I genuinely felt I got a bit more insight to Tegan and the development of Tegan. I also got, and it occupies my mind quite a bit, this idea that Tegan's not quite as smart as other companions, which I think is somewhat unfair, but there is a logic to that. And the thing about this book, because she's got a bit of a leg up on Nyssa and on Turlough, because she's read Alice in Wonderland, she kind of knows how the game is played here, even though she gets frightened, as you would expect. It throws her in a new light. That's absolutely delightful. He gets Turlough very well, but not the Turlough later Turlough, but this Turlough where he's still toying with the idea of doing the Doctor in. But I think this is intentional. Turlo's drawn as a fairly sort of two-dimensional character, like grumbling and moaning and this, that and the other. But that's beautiful because that's offset with Nissa, who's this ebullient and joyous, and I want to make friends with the caterpillar because the caterpillar is really nice. And there's something about drawing those characters as clearly as that and as cleanly as that, which actually made their presence in Alice in Wonderland and Doctor Who, the concert's presence in Alice in Wonderland, absolutely sing. So it was a really special thing. And I do think that given the lineage, Alice in Wonderland and Doctor Who, and given the fact that you are able to play with logic and sense, and like Doctor Who sometimes can, this has ended up with being a really special little experience. Now, I'll finish up now. You should go and read this. Please go and read this. Marvellous book. I've really, really enjoyed it. But I want to read you this quote. And this, this is Paul Magrs shouting at us, isn't it? But you'll see what I mean. Where he says, the book is only a physical and very temporary form. The thing about a truly great story and truly living characters is that they float free. They drift free of where they began. And then they take on a life in the world outside. Well, listen, I mean, you got to look around my house. You got to look around anywhere I go, the clothes I wear. You've got to look at the fact that Paul Magrs has written Doctor Who books and audio plays and X, Y, and Z for like loads of different, these characters that were on a 25-minute TV programme in the 1980s now exist and still live and breathe, and we can see them and engage with them in different ways. I watched flipping that little clip from the new DVD release. No, the new Blu-ray release with Davison and Janet Fielding and Mark Strickson played Turlo. They exist now. They have a life independently of the thing that they're from. And if you were ever going to find a platform on which to explore that within the context of Doctor Who and just give us an opportunity to think about that in a completely logical and yet illogical way, well, this is it. Absolutely fantastic book. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Like I say, I've got another one on the shelf. I'm going to pick up the others as and when I can. But thank you, Paul Magrs. That has been a lovely, lovely little run up to Christmas. Highly appropriate. See you later.